Swiftwater technician training to train some new personnel from Columbia Fire Department, Irmo Fire Department, and West Columbia Fire Department, along with the Columbia Parks and Recs. And we're training new personnel onto the skills of technician level for swiftwater emergencies. The swiftwater atmosphere that's created on the river here, mainly the lower Saluda River, creates a very dynamic rescue atmosphere. So we want to make sure that our rescue personnel are adequately trained to operate in these conditions, because we don't have time. Once we're in the water, or if we have somebody in the water, we don't have time to really plan and come up with stuff. So we have to be very reactionary. So we want to make sure that our personnel are properly trained to be able to spring into action and effect a rescue safely for ourselves and hopefully for the victims. We continue to see an increase in the number of rescues that we see, just because the added greenway activity, the recreational use of the river, which is all good, but the more people that we see come out to the river, the greater the risk. So we want to make sure that we're able to address those risks. We probably respond 50 to 60 times a year to calls for assistance on the river. Typical accidents that we see on the river are stranded personnel, people that get out onto the river, don't pay attention to the sirens, or maybe don't know what the siren's for. They don't read the warning signs or have familiarity with the river. So the water comes up when they start to release water from the dam, and they get stranded on a river or washed out onto one of the islands behind us. We start with the crawl, walk, run mindset. So the personnel spent a full day in a classroom yesterday and doing some familiarity with terminology and the layout of the river that we're working on. Today they're progressing and they're learning some basic water skills, self-rescue for themselves if they were to fall in unexpectedly. You know, how can they save themselves and then effect some rescues with some basic equipment and tools that they have with them. It's important that when anybody's using the water recreationally, that they prepare themselves, they have a plan. They just don't come out onto the river and just intend to hang out. You want to make sure that, one, you notify people to let them know that you're out here. It is a remote area, and typically people, because they're going to be around the water, may not bring a cell phone with them, or if they do, it may get wet and damaged. So you want to make sure people know where you're going to be and for how long, estimated at least. And then also make sure that you take care of yourself and that you have proper stuff like a PFD. That's the main thing that we want to make sure that people, when they come out here, everybody, children, adults, no matter what your swimming level is, you know, even if you're a good swimmer, you could slip and fall. The rocks are very slippery. People think that they're good swimmers, they fall, slip on a rock, and then they end up hitting their head and they can't save themselves. So we want to make sure that PFDs are used for anybody out on the river. The training we're doing today, this week, the 3-day class, is a technician level class. We do this probably every other year, just to help through attrition with numbers. We lose people, or through promotion, people get promoted up and then they don't need that skill necessarily. But we do this training every year for refresher. So we make sure that our personnel on an annual basis go through the refresher training. They come out for about an 8-hour day. We do night scenarios because a lot of our rescues tend to start in the afternoon when people notice that someone isn't home or they haven't got back from their trip on the river for the day, and they start making phone calls, and that's when we get called out. So we traditionally see a lot of our calls either start late in the afternoon or even in the evening. So we make sure that they're trained to learn to work in the dark. The danger of the river is that it's ever changing. The levels can change in a matter of 30 minutes when they release water. They started releasing this morning around 6:30, and it's still continuing to come up. So it's going to change. And the thing with the siren is, when that goes off, it doesn't say how high the water level is going to get. You can follow the app and you can see what the levels are now, but they don't necessarily let you know what it's going to be in 2 or 3 hours from now. So when the siren goes off, that's just letting you know that they're flowing. It doesn't say how much. So a lot of times people say, well, I was out here last Saturday and the siren went off and it only came up 2 inches, so I'm going to stay out here. And they don't realize that now they're flowing 6,000 CFS instead of 1,000 CFS. And now all of a sudden they said, well, maybe I should have, got off the river. And now they're stuck out on a rock. And we want them to stay out on a rock. We don't want them to attempt to try and get off. If they don't feel comfortable, because there are a lot of dangers with the river. It's a very rocky river, which means as the water comes up, your foot can get entrapped under a rock and then you get pinned. So that is a dangerous scenario. So with the river, we want to make sure if people are worried and stranded, stay where you're at, call for help, try and stay dry, and we'll come get you. The river, last week we did refresher training, so we had 3 days of refresher training, and there was a lot of comments about how different the river is. With the flood, there's areas where we have sandbars that we didn't have sandbars. All the islands are now covered in a layer of sand, so they're almost like a sandy beach where they were almost rocky before. So the cut of the river is different. The river is wider in portions, so that changes the dynamic of the flows. It tends to make it a little more smoother, so there's not as many rapids, but then in other areas there may be rapids where there weren't. So we don't know what it's going to turn out to be, but we do know there is an increased use of the river, which is good, and we want people to get out and enjoy the recreation, but we just want them to do it safely.